Much, Mark. So at this stage, I think I'll just ask the rest of the Finan to join us again, and then I'm going to ask Oisín and Amrutha to join, and I'm going to introduce Oisín and Amrutha because I haven't done that previously. So if I could just ask the hi there and ask everyone to turn on their audio and their cameras, and hopefully everybody's able to see them there. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly introduce Mr. Oisín Kern, CEO and co-founder at Odyssey VC. Oisín has been working in life sciences for more than 2 decades. During this time, he has held leading roles in transforming life sciences across multiple business areas, including regulatory and compliance, digital and connected health. Oisín has extensive experience in life science applications, GXP cloud integration, IoT, and healthcare system deployment. So welcome, Oisín. And
thanks, Polly.
Thanks very much. And Amrutha Prakash, sorry, I hope I said that right. Amrutha has previously worked as a CSV engineer before moving into QA and compliance. This unique experience combination allows Amrutha to support pharmaceutical clients in the building of quality and compliance processes that can answer industry required standards and regulations. With an in-depth knowledge of biotechnology, microbiology, and more, this enables her to efficiently trace processes from R&D to product delivery. So delighted to have you on the panel, Amrutha. Thank you for joining us too. Okay, so I'm going to kick off with the first question that I think came up during Mark's presentation, but I'm going to send it here and out to the panel. With the drive to ensure compliance of cloud technology and cloud activities to industry regulations, do we see a need for the traditionally separate roles of IT and compliance start to merge? So sorry, I don't know if I read that. Do we see a need for the traditionally separate roles of IT and compliance start to merge? Will they start to share responsibilities? How do you see this work? I guess that's a question about whether we see the IT and compliance roles start to merge because of the introduction of cloud technology.
Yeah, I might jump in on that one, Pauline. So I mean, looking at the topic for today in terms of management systems, I mean, the reason we're actually doing this particular webinar is probably partly a response to that question, is because the traditional split, say, between quality and compliance in terms of ensuring consistent output of a business process or a business and IT, in particular, when you talk about SaaS companies, I'm aware there's a diverse group who are probably joining us today, some from the manufacturer side, some from the SaaS side. But if you're a SaaS company, it's inherently connected. Now you do have that internal function, which Ruth is probably better placed to talk to, but the independence of the quality function internally to make sure that your processes are consistently achieving their desired outcome is important. And that's where you get a slight split in terms of the responsibilities. But I think what Mark is talking about, I mean, we're really excited about it here in terms of bringing that to industry. When you look at actually embedding compliance processes directly into how IT runs its day-to-day business, because with all due respect to our IT colleagues, historically, they like to focus on IT jobs and not the administration of the job, so to speak. So I think Mark is a really great statement. There's anything that you're doing is, automate yourself out of a job is a good way of looking at that, is looking at those processes, looking at those compliance processes to achieve consistent intended outcomes and build those into the day-to-day activities of our IT colleagues. And that way we get much better product. So in my view, if you're a SaaS company, I think it's probably inevitable, if not probably almost mandatory at this stage, is that you embed compliance directly into your day-to-day processes, because otherwise, how do you achieve that desired outcome for your target customers in life sciences? Because they're going to ask you for evidence of this anyway. So I think it's a real differentiator,
Yeah. Great, thanks, Oisín. Here's maybe a question I'll maybe send first to Amrutha. Is implementing a QMS and ISMS going to be expensive? Interesting question.
If you have a quality management system already in place, or even if you think you don't have one, I think all companies do have a basic structure. They have processes already in place, even though you might not realize it.
Yeah.
So depending on which standard you would like to follow based on your services and products, I don't think it's very expensive. It takes time and effort, of course, and you have to also include or integrate a culture of quality into your management system. So that mindset is very important when you implement that in your organization. So it's basically changing that or integrating that culture into your company first, and then working towards a standard based on your service.
So building it in. So it shouldn't be an overhead, it should be built in from the start.
Yes, it's a commitment.
Yeah, actually, and just something I'd like to add on to that, Pauline, because what Marisa is saying is exactly right. When it comes to the cost of it, everybody likes to make sure that they're minimizing the overhead, perceived overhead. But as Marisa said, there's an expectation that what you're producing is governed by a quality system. It's not actually overhead, it's part of doing business. But I think one of the important things that we noticed ourselves, and for all, say, SMEs who might be joining the call, it's very easy to engage a third party and say, please come in and install a QMS for me. That's sometimes a challenge because you know your business and you know your business processes. So albeit it's a bit of a headache, I think putting in place that minimum structure that you know best on what's required to produce the output of your business and your business processes is probably more cost effective than asking or downloading a set of procedures and just installing them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and maybe what you need then is just guidance along the way. But as you say, you know your business best, so it's best for you to start with it.
Exactly, and by all means, like, look for support in terms of structure and drafting and implementation. But your SME knowledge and your business knowledge is pretty important in terms of capturing that in the procedural side of how you run the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Oisín. Another question, what is the best way to train stakeholders to understand the QMS that manages cloud activities?
Is this to me? Yeah, can I take it?
Yeah, of course you can take it, Amrita. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So as I said, again, it's about focusing on what your requirements are based on your company's needs. So as long as you document and practice what you actually do and not what you should do. Mm-hmm. So if you state that this is something I should do, but don't follow it, that might be a problem in future. So it's important that you always have the management system in line with what your needs are as a company. So none of the standards or regulatory requirements says this is how you should do it. It's completely dependent on what your company's needs are. And also, another thing I would like to suggest is when you're implementing a management system, always integrate the idea of thinking of how it's going to have a consequence or how it's going to impact a system or the quality of what you deliver to your customers. So if somebody is trained on a procedure, it's very good, but they should also know what happens if they don't follow that procedure.
Okay.
How does that impact? That's also very important.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point you've made, actually, Rita, because that's one way also to remember how to do it well rather than the wrong way. If you really understand by not doing it the correct way what the impact is, it'll remind you to follow us. Yeah. Thank you, Amrita. Another question here. In your experience, have industry regulators assessed QMS and ISMS agreements that govern cloud activities? But maybe Finan or somebody in.
Okay. Yes, we have direct connection with that. Okay. They did look at the agreements. They did look at the architectures as well, and what was the data flow and what was the overall architecture of that cloud relationship. And they asked questions about how much. What they did dig into was how much the user knew about the architecture and the relationship it had with the vendor. And very often, and sometimes they find out that the user doesn't fully understand the relationship, doesn't understand the architecture and where the data might be going and all that. And that's because they weren't involved in the quality agreements or the terms and conditions that were provided by the thing. So they're not fully aware. And I know this is one of the things I discussed with Oisín, and it's a new concept within data integrity now, is this thing of a data owner. And that's one of the things that they didn't display, was that somebody needs to own data from the minute it's created to the time it's destroyed. And that was not fully understood. and not properly called out in the agreement, but absolutely for sure, they have looked to see service level agreements, quality agreements, and checking if the regulated customer understands the full relationship and how it impacts them and where their data is going, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we have seen that.
Okay, so it's good to understand them, have them at hand, and it's very much something that they would look for. It's good to know. Thanks, Finan. I think we have time for maybe one more question and have a look at that, or maybe getting to the end of the questions that come through. So it looks like a long one, so I'll see if I read it out properly. So excuse me. The implementation of compliant DevOps and compliant to ensure software and service quality for cloud applications seems a very new concept. One, is it? And two, do you think auditors, the regulatory bodies and industry are ready to accept or approve it? Maybe.
I can probably take the first part anyway. It's more a new use case for existing approaches. So we're kind of using ITIL, which has been around for decades, and DevOps, which has been around for quite a few years, in a different environment and adding to it. But the core value of those things is already well proven. You know, we can see the value of DevOps. We can see the impact it has. There are a growing number of companies who never manually test any part of their code base, but still manage to run quality, in a general sense, quality software solutions. On the auditor piece, I think anyone else in the panel can probably answer this better than me, but I think really it's probably the move from CSV to CSA is probably aligned with this. It's a different kind of approach, and but I think it's I think you need to prove the value of the work that you're doing in that sense. I think that's why BDD is an important part of it too, because you can sort of see that link between the user requirements and the executed tests, if you like.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think just on that second part, probably just follow on from where Mark is going with it. Those concepts, I think this was at the root of what we were saying here, is you take best practices that we know produce good software, that produce good products. But what we're talking about here is integrating the expectations from a compliance perspective into those processes. So what does not work, and we know that this happens in audits all the time, that if you have an FTA auditor and you come in, you know, they're asking for evidence, and you say, oh, well, we've got an ISO cert, that doesn't wash. It's an evidence-based business. So what I don't think here is going to work is, here's my DevOps process. It's up to you, auditor, to figure out how that fits with the regulations. I think the key here is translating the evidence that's automatically produced as part of these standardized processes and translating them into the structure that is familiar based on the regulatory frameworks. And this is where, as Mark said, there's a lot of work to do on this, but at Odyssey, this is what we're helping SaaS companies do now is, you know, Mark spoke in detail there about BDD. Here we can translate those into user requirements. So if somebody says, let me see your user requirements document, here it is. Let me see your test evidence against those user requirements. It comes from a different part of the flow. Show me the qualification of your infrastructure. Here's the evidence that's provided from the tooling that we're using. So I think an auditor won't accept, yes, we have compliant DevOps, no more questions. They'll want to see the evidence that's produced from that. And I think that's the key, I think, opportunity in the industry here is to actually translate that now and leverage those best practices that have been around for a while.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I think that's the end actually of our questions that have been put through. So I suppose I'm going to wrap on the panel discussion and thank everybody for joining it. So thank you to Mark and Marutha, Finan and Oisín. You know, great insight there and great answers to the questions. Not necessarily an easy topic, so I think you answered them very well, and some complicated questions in there. So thanks so much. So I think that's getting close to the close of our webinar session today. I would like to just thank everybody for attending this session. I'd like all the contributors to the session. Thank you very much. We'll share the poll results that we ran during the session on our social media, so please look out for those. And finally, just to say, you know, we are running this as a series, so part 3 of the series will be taking place on Tuesday, the 27th of September, and we'll discuss at that point, we'll be discussing selecting fit-for-purpose cloud solutions and avoiding the pitfalls. So I'd just like to welcome everybody back to that session and look out for that. So thank you to all once again, and we'll close our webinar session for today. Take care.